upset because I know that originally my boss, Minister of State, Mr. Zsolt Németh, was invited, VIP lecturer, very experienced lecturer. However, I got this honor to share some ideas with you here on behalf of the nation state, because Hungary is one of them. I hope that, however, nation state and democracy doesn't rule out each other, we at least strive for that on our behalf here in Hungary, and also on a European scale, also in the ethnic dimensions. That's what my presentation is about. Just first and foremost, let me mention and of course my boss's appreciation to this conference. I think it's really important that even in these days of the European economic crisis, we do not speak always exclusively about banking unions and financial crisis, but we keep our eyes also on such important issues like cultural diversity, ethnic diversity of Europe, and especially that of Central Europe, which are treasures, which are values, however, contain challenges for the whole continent and for the whole region. I saw with pleasure in your program that there was an interesting walking tourist included in your program. I appreciated especially to demonstrate the multicultural or culturally diverse character of Budapest and its surroundings. We did the same when we published the guide to the different cultures of Budapest during the Hungarian EU presidency, where we tried to demonstrate Budapest to the guests of the presidency events as a city of many cultures. We try to demonstrate the cultural footprint of all the 27 member states and all the 13 ethnic minorities and some other cultures who do not consider themselves minority. In Hungary, for example, the Jewish Budapest, although Israel is not a member state of the European Union, the Jewish do not consider themselves ethnic minority in Hungary, or the Turkish, although we do not have an official Turkish minority community here in Budapest, but the Turkish culture left such an important footprint here, and it was important. Would I know that, then I would take an example from this guide, but I hope to present it sooner or later to the organizers in order that during the next conference it can be handed also over to the participants. Now let me start my presentation with some definition, because in the title of my humble presentation there is put notion diaspora policies, and one should know that when we in Hungary speak about diaspora, then we have in mind those Hungarians or ethnic Hungarians. When saying ethnic Hungarians, I mean those who do not have Hungarian state citizenship, who or whose ancestors left the Carpathian Basin, which is the indigenous space of residence of all Hungarians. Those who have not left this part of the world yet, different changes of the borders of the Hungarian state made them minorities. Together with different names, there is actually quite heavy debate in Hungary how shall we call them Hungarians abroad, határon túli magyarok, or another expression for Hungarians abroad, külhoni magyarok, or Hungarian communities in neighboring states. Surely not diaspora, because they never spread from this region that we call the Carpathian Basin. Not they were who crossed the borders, but the borders crossed them. Nonetheless, I understand that when giving this title to my presentation in the context of diplomacy and interstate relations, the organizers must have interpreted this notion also in the context of the relations between Hungary and the ethnic Hungarians here in the neighboring states. Thus, I focus on this topic in that context. Diaspora policies in this interpretation means mainly Hungary's approach to the fact that due to those changes of our borders, quite large indigenous ethnic Hungarian communities live in those states which are our neighbors. Some 1.5 million in Romania, 500,000 in Slovakia, 300,000 in Serbia, 160,000 in the Ukraine, and some smaller communities in the remaining states. There are two baskets of issues in this respect. One is the question that how Hungary tackles the fact that the vast majority of our states speaks the same language, the vast majority of the population of our states speaks the same language, maintains the same traditions, identifies himself with the same historical personalities, etc. Like those ethnic Hungarians belonging to those communities I mentioned. Another aspect of the issue is that these different ties, like family ties, like friendly ties, like working ties between the Hungarian society and the ethnic Hungarians abroad, make a certain kind of feeling of solidarity between the Hungarian society and them, and thus the Hungarian society, and thus also the Hungarian state, is deeply interested in their fate, in the basic circumstances of their existence, and of course also the legal situation of them. This is the second aspect of what we call now, not really correctly, diaspora policies. But there are two other notions in the title of my presentation. This is diplomacy and interstate relations, which are quite closely connected, because diplomacy is about interstate relations. Diplomats always represent states vis-à-vis states, even if they are so-called social diplomacy, which is a quite modern part of diplomacy. Even then, they are delegated to states, and social diplomacy targets getting more information about the society of another state, but in order to establish relations between states. Now, diaspora policy and interstate relations. These are two notions with completely other character. Because on one hand, when we speak about diaspora policy, it is about contacts between a subject of the international law, a state, Hungary, and communities who are not enjoying this status, are not subjects of the international law. On the other hand, when we speak about interstate relations, these are connections between subjects of international law of equal rank. However, despite this very diverse character of the two notions, they were put rightly in one basket in the title of the presentation offered for me, because they influence each other quite deeply in the case of the ethnic Hungarians in our neighboring states. I must refer to the fact that this is rather true to our contacts with our neighbors, because when we speak about the real diaspora, So those Hungarians who are living, who are spread throughout the world, their fate, their situation rarely appears in the diplomatic contacts. Sometimes, yes. For example, quite heavy emigration of the Hungarian Roma to Canada. This was a quite important issue in our bilateral relations, which, however, seems to come to a rest because this wave of emigration is decreasing decisively. However, generally, where in our diplomacy the ethnic question appears is rather geographically or very near surroundings. More or less with all our neighboring states, we have so-called basic treaties which speak fundamentally about this question, which regulate our dialogue with the neighboring states on the interethnic relations. And on the base of these basic treaties, a quite developed framework of different mixed committees and some other forms of dialogue is built up. So, when we spoke until now about interethnic relations with our neighboring states, then we mentioned three different relations. One is between Hungary and her neighbors, Romania, Slovakia, Ukraine, Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia, partly also with Austria, these question figures. The other aspect is the linkage, from the point of view of the international politics, an informal linkage, but however existing linkage between the ethnic Hungarian communities and Hungary. And the third relation is between the ethnic Hungarian communities, the minority communities. Some people do not love this expression, minority. Let me allow the expression of the presentation. Between the minority communities and the states on which is territories they exist. So this is a triangle. Actually, I took a slide where these triangles can be projected because probably it might make more easy to describe our strategy concerning ethnopolitics in our neighboring relations when we have also looked to that one. Yes, this one exactly. I see. This is demonstrated here in the example of Romania, but we could draw such a triangle vis-a-vis more or less all of our partners. We see that this is a triangle where the angles themselves are the two capitals. In this case, Budapest and Bucharest, but we could have Budapest and Bratislava here, or Budapest and Kiev here, Budapest and Belgrade here. And the third angle is the ethnic minority, the kin community, which lives on the territory of the other state. Now, when we wish to define what is our aim in our neighborhood policy, then I could say that this is to have as much as possible harmony at all the sides of this triangle and to limit all the frustrations at all the sides of this triangle. The sides of this triangle are the relations between these communities, actually the community and the state of residence of it, and the relation between community and its key state, in our case. We believe, due to our experience, that this can be reached exclusively at all the sides of the triangle at the same time, because the traverse of one of the sides obviously contaminate the other two sides. Let us take as an example a supposed, often close to reality, situation when the two capitals agree amongst themselves that they will cherish excellent interstate relations, despite the fact that serious disputes take place about the linguistic rights or public administration reforms or anything else between one of them and the key minority of the other inhabiting the territory of the first one. Let us suppose that they decide simply not to speak about these problems in order to avoid dispute among themselves. What will happen in this case? Surely, the kin community concerned will do its best to alarm the public opinion of the kin state and remind it about the lack of solidarity of the state authorities with the kin community in trouble. So, finally, because we are democratic states, the government of the kin state will not have any other choice but to withdraw from the agreement with its partner, even if it shakes their mutual confidence for years. And lack of confidence never forges stability. Lack of confidence might appear in the relation between states or ethnic communities, or between a state and ethnic community, or even between different parts of an ethnic community on different sides of the border. A lack of confidence between them always hides risks for stability. What is more, lack of confidence is always a painful situation. It's not good to live without confidence. Let us not forget that all the people have only one life. Everything is bad that forces whole generations to spend their life under circumstances that are featured by a lack of confidence, either with another nation, or another ethnic community, or other parts of the same community. When making diplomacy of politics, and especially ethnopolitics, one should never forget that the subjects of all these are people, men and women, who have only one life that they will spend either happily or bitterly full of frustration. This is our responsibility. This is why we must strive for harmony at all the sides of our neighborhood triangles, even if reaching this goal often appears not very easy. It is not very easy because of many reasons, though mainly because of the fact that this scheme of the triangle is a certain kind of simplification. In our foreign policy strategy, we speak about the triangle in order to make easier the understanding of our endeavors. We are, however, aware that the real picture is much more complicated. In one of the previous examples, we saw already that, for instance, when we speak about the kin state, it covers at least two things, both the state authorities and the public opinion. We did not mention, however, yet, that even the public opinion has different segments. That the political elite of a democratic state is unique but fragmented, usually in the form of different competing parties. That the different branches of the state itself might have diverging views on the same issues as well. This is, however, far from characterizing the kin states exclusively. I could say exactly the same about the resident states of the ethnic minorities. They have public opinion, NGOs, churches, cultural life, etc. So they are internally diverse, more or less on the same scale as the kin state in our case, Hungary. What is more, the kin communities themselves, the ethnic minorities themselves, can just dream about being uniform. Let us take just an example, the ethnic Hungarian ceremonial. How many movements, parties, competing great personalities and diverging endeavors are present in their circle. How all of them claim being the only true representatives of the Transylvanian Hungarian community. How difficult it is for the kin state to find the adequate partner among them. Not only for the kin state, but everybody who approaches them, including the state presidents. And this is only the political elite of theirs. They have their plural civil society, public opinion too, and no one can ensure that these are always in line with what their political elite represents. The general picture is further complicated by the existence of a jungle of direct links between the similar fragments of the three angles of the triangle. For example, the followers of the same political ideology from the two countries being present also in the circle of the ethnic minorities sometimes feel each other much closer to each other than to their own co-nationals. What is more, when we speak about Hungary's neighboring relations, in each of them there is present not only one triangle, but at least two triangles, because those states which are the resident states of the ethnic Hungarian minority usually are key states of the kin communities, of the ethnic minorities in Hungary. And of course also those communities are relevant players of this whole neighborhood game. So, if we search the landscape by microscope, we will get a map much more exciting for the scientists and much more confusing for the policymakers than the simplification of the triangle. Nonetheless, applying the triangle model for our analysis has offered us at least three advantages. One is the fact that it reminds us always about the inseparability of the three questions: interstate relations with our neighbors, their relations to the Hungarian communities living under their roof, and our connection to these communities. The triangle is a useful framework for the definition of the goals, as second, of our neighborhood policy and diaspora policies, which, as I mentioned before, is creating harmony and eliminating frustrations along all sides of the triangle. And as third, basing on the framework of the triangle, we have the opportunity to arrange easier our possible instruments that serve shaping the whole situation. It's probably needless to say that it would make no sense to define goals without scrutinizing the means by which we can have chance to fulfill them. Let us have a look to these instruments. At all sides of the triangle, I mean relations between all the actors of our neighborhood policy, communication is crucial. This, however, is one of the mostly vulnerable points of the system, because under the circumstances of the freedom of expression that, despite all the criticism against Hungary and some other states here in the region, freedom of expression prevails in our region. And this disables any strategies to keep communication under any kind of control. One unfortunate declaration of a politician, or one irresponsible article by a journalist, or one misinterpretation of what a politician said by a journalist can ruin many years of work for harmony on the different sides of the triangle. Let me just give an example from the recent days. When I opened, probably yesterday or the day before yesterday, the dailies, I saw in the headlines that my minister, Mr. Martonyi, claimed Slovakia to apologize for the so-called Beneš decrees. Beneš decrees were some discriminative laws after the Second World War in Slovakia. I read it and I wondered, well, okay, it's good if they apologize us or the ethnic Hungarian community there, but it's the voice how my minister usually forms his opinion vis-a-vis other states. Probably somehow he forms his opinion vis-a-vis his colleagues, us, but not to other states. So I looked what exactly he said. It was something like that. In order to have, from the point of view of the rapprochement between Slovakia and Hungary, it would be desirable that the Slovak side considers how could it make any gesture vis-a-vis the ethnic Hungarian community there, also in the case of the Beneš decree. So you can feel that the whole message of what he exactly said was completely as what appeared in the newspapers. So the whole question of communication, which is crucial at all sides of this triangle, rather problematic, and we cannot hope that anytime in the history will work it properly. However, there are also other ways to influence these situations. For example, the relation between the neighboring states might be controlled by different forms of dialogue. Here you can see the different instruments in this blue quadrants. We've applied a developed system of that with our neighbors, which is the network of different basic treaties and mixed communities, as I mentioned already. Although the efficiency of this system might be disputed, it is nevertheless doubtless that it contributes to the emergence of confidence between the authorities of the two sides, and as I mentioned, confidence is crucial. Earlier, also the model of so-called joint governmental sessions belonged to this set of instruments. Our current government, however, is not very much favor of that very form of cooperation because of its inefficiency. But of other forms, it is favor and they work, and I personally have a very positive experience of that. Also, the atmosphere of the relations between the king state and the relevant minority might be influenced, for example, by subsidies of the king state to the cultural life, educational, civil society of the king community, or contribution to the development of the region inhabited by them. State citizenship of the king state might also be a means serving for that purpose. Nowadays, this latter one is in the center of what Hungary offers for those who have Hungarian origin, I mean those whose ancestors were once Hungarian citizens and speak our language. Relations between the minorities and the states that contain their land of birth are regulated first and foremost, this third side of the triangle is regulated first and foremost by minority rights, which either correspond with the expectation and the needs of the minority residing, thus in their satisfaction, or fail to do so, causing thus frustrations on both sides. When saying on both sides, I have in mind that the presence of a dissatisfied minority usually provokes anger amongst the representatives of the ethnic majority with what they consider excessive claims of that community. Thus, the coexistence of majorities and minorities can be regulated by minority rights too, or more or less exclusively by the state on that territory they live together, and not by the king state. What the king state can try is first and foremost using bilateral interstate relations to convince the partner state of the usefulness of ensuring sufficient rights and applying adequate institutions that satisfy the needs of the minority. So, for example, Hungary tries to promote the different forms of autonomy that, in our understanding, could result in an emerging harmony between ethnic Hungarians and both authorities and ethnic majorities of those states in which they exist together. The Keynote might also strive for such international or regional circumstances, thus for international guidelines or regulations, which motivate everybody to enlarge minority rights and introduce autonomy models. Thus we arrived to the fact that these triangles do not exist in a vacuum, political vacuum, but they exist amongst the circumstances of the continuously developing international law and European community law. One should, however, neither exaggerate the importance of these forms of policy making, as we Hungarians did for a long time, vainly expecting the solution of all problems from these structures, nor underestimate it, because this factor is decisive for the space of action of all the players of the new creations. Thus, Hungary has always been a pioneer of enshrining minority rights in European and the international documents. We managed even to put it in the Lisbon Treaty, which is the basic treaty of the European Union. Here, let me just to give certain footnote to one of the statements of my previous co-speaker, Professor Bayer, who said that the EU denies collective rights. Well, the EU doesn't force collective rights, but it doesn't deny it. It is up to the member states. The whole minority policy actually is not a community policy. There is no EU minority policy. There are some actions of the EU which protect minorities, but there is no common EU minority policy standards. So, despite all the dreams from the 90s of the Hungarian society, especially the Hungarian minorities, the EU doesn't force its members to introduce collective rights or autonomy, but it doesn't deny it. A lot of autonomy and a lot of collective rights work throughout the European Union in different member states, Italy, Belgium, Finland. Nobody denies it. All the member states can introduce it. But there is no pressure on them. The efficiency of this work, however, is a matter of disputes. Just taking the EU as an example, despite the former minority right criteria of the EU accession of the Central European states, because when the criteria of the accession were defined in the Copenhagen summit of the EU, one of the criteria was the stability of the minority protection institutions. Despite this fact, we often face a worsen in the situation of the minorities in some of the member states, which, however, doesn't mean that the EU is not useful for minority protection, because the different policies, for example, the anti-discrimination law, for example, the Charter of the Basic Rights, which is attached to the Lisbon Treaty, are very important parts of a European cooperation for minorities too. I'm afraid that I overused my time, but certainly if there are some questions quickly, I'm ready to try to answer. Thank you very much.